So one thing really quick that we're supposed to let everybody know that the reception is, since it's, I guess, a little bit of rain, it's going to be in here. So there's no need to leave at the end of our session. You can just stay right here. If you want to, if there are drinks are available, feel free to go. You can watch this drunk if you want. It's up to you. Because I was told earlier that this is a boring topic, Sergio. Not saying names, Sergio. I don't know if he's out there right now. Anyway, he said that. And I said, yeah, your social security number's boring too, right? But you're not going to get to be able to collect your retirement money without it. So we're the UPI Workgroup chairs. And this is our, obviously the UPI talk, Universal Property Identifier. I'm Mark Bessett. I've been doing this since about, I want to say 2015. Jeremy was over there. I should ask him. He was the one that pushed me into this gig. Him and Mike Werzer, wherever he's at. Yeah, thanks, Mike. Thanks for volunteering me. No, I'm kidding. I've been doing this for a long time, 30 years I've been working in software, and about the last 11 years I've been working for two of the biggest MLSs in the country here. It's been a wild ride, and it's a little different than most industries, but now I'm working in my own company, as you can see there, so I've actually graduated from the MLS factor, which is interesting because now I can work on lots of new things, including AI, which is moving into our space. And that's kind of what I've been working on most recently. So I'm going to let Matt talk about himself.
Hi, excuse me, I'm Matt Casey with Cirrus Data, the vice chair. And Mark and I were talking beforehand, and this is actually a good thing. We both agree we were not very good at self-promotion, either truly ourselves or the company. But we said, especially in Mark's case, since he's changed roles, that we should do a bit more of that. I have not changed roles in quite some time. But I'm going to do just a little bit about Cirrus Data that I think is going to be relevant to UPI. And I was thinking of this morning. So if you don't know, most of you know you're in Metro Birmingham. You're technically in Hoover, but it's the Metro Birmingham area. And the county is Jefferson County. And so Cirrus was founded in the late 80s. I was still in high school. I didn't found the company. But I did start working there in the late 90s. And Birmingham, back then, Cirrus sold our services, which is obviously software and all that's changed a lot, but what we do in terms of providing property records to people in real estate, that's how we started. But back then, we sold at the agent broker level. But Birmingham was one of our first markets outside of Tennessee. And so back then, in order to provide our service, we would send a data person to the courthouse to say, can we buy your assessment file? And then if we could get the assessment file, then we would send more people to the registrar's office, or typically called the registrar's office. It varies by county a bit, but they would key sales and mortgage data. And that's how we built the data set. And then we'd have a salesperson who would call on agents, small banks, appraisers, et cetera. So back then, the need for a UPI in terms of our business was fairly minimal. We sourced 100% of the data we used. We didn't integrate with any other softwares. We didn't provide services to strategic customers like MLSs. Fast forward to now, we now have a national data set. So we have data in every county, or county equivalent, because of places like Hawaii and Virginia, you have to say county equivalent, which is about 3,242. In order to do that, we source data directly ourselves for a large part of the country. And then in some markets, we work with third-party data sources. So right there, you've got two data sources. And one quick example, a very real-world example, which won't go into too much detail, but we just recently redid how we're sourcing parcel maps. So the actual parcel boundaries, just I won't bore you with all the details, but basically move from a particular type of source to another. And so in order to do that, we had to do, on a 3,242 county basis, match the parcel ID in our tabular attribute data to the parcel ID as provided in the GIS shapefiles, which took multiple people an extensive period of time. And as you all know, time is money. And in some idealistic future, which hopefully is not too far in the future, both of those data sets would have had UPI, and it would have been just a straight select, this plus this. So a little self-promotion, a little UPI. Next slide.
So real quick, this is our kind of agenda. We're going to talk about the objectives of the UPI because I think as people come to the work group, they come different stages of exposure to the UPI, and this question always comes up. So we're just going to do a quick overview on that. We're going to talk about the current challenges and plans at the UPI work group that we have, the version change that's coming up and why that's important, how we're going to play with the data dictionary. We have to move forward on that a little bit, so we have some discussions there. And of course, international research that we've worked on and the considerations that UPI has specifically in the international space. So just to get a good level set, in case someone doesn't know what the UPI is or how it works, but this is really our mission. And it's to identify at the lowest level of granularity of recordable real property. And that's a specific question that's come up, so I want to make sure everyone understands that. We utilize the government's hierarchy. So really the government's using the UPI, they just don't know it. This was a big deal actually as a topic when we were working internationally, and we'll talk about that a little later. The idea of how we set it up also was to be extensible. So once we have the property defined, you can define other things about the property, other characteristics. It's not so much about defining them to get them out of the UPI, but it's a way to identify with a serial number, so to speak, those sub things like the boat slips that we saw earlier, things like that. We can define properties that's otherwise composable with the UPI. So a lot of times you see a listing, it might have 3 or 4 parcels on it. It could have an option, you can do parcel A, parcel B, or parcel A and B, or parcel just C, all kinds of weird. Anyone that's been in the MLS knows there's really, you see everything. UPI would be those components. It's not really designed to convey the information about the parcel number. We just have the parcel number built into it because that's a natural way to make something both unique and universal. So I have a quick example up here. Like the VIN's not really designed to tell you the manufacturer of the car, but there is a digit. There's a couple digits in there that's really designed so that every manufacturer gets a particular digit so that on their VINs it will just work with all the rest of the VINs. That's a really good, we struggle for those kinds of anecdotal comparisons, and that's actually a pretty good one. Oh, and the other thing is, you see how I put some things in here, how you would use that VIN in an analogous way that we use the UPI in this industry. And for parts identification, that's you get the VIN. Registration, if there's a recall notice, right? Those are all ways that you look at the VIN, but the VIN is just a number, right? It's just a string of things that gets put together in a very specific way to guarantee uniqueness, and it guarantees that it's universal everywhere you go, at least in the United States. So that's a good way to think of it, of its mission.
And I'll address this briefly here, and then we'll talk about it a couple more times. But for those of you that have been in these presentations or in the work group, you're well aware of this point. But there is a bit of confusion even now. What does the U in UPI stand for? Does that mean unique or does that mean universal? It very much means universal. Unique in and of itself is not that difficult. If you're maintaining data at any level, you're unique. A simple example, let's say that Mark and I both, we maintain records of property, and we are maintaining the same property, but I number them 1, 2, 3, which is a unique numbering system of 3. And he numbers or letters his ABC, also unique, but we are not going to match at all. And so it really is the emphasis on the universal. And by definition, if it's universal, it's going to be unique. It's kind of a square rectangle type argument. Okay, so as Mark mentioned in the agenda slide, kind of from a work group standpoint, where are we? We're very close to recommending a version 2.0. And there's been a lot of work from a standards perspective and also a lot of work looking at data. And if you don't know this, and I think it's pretty much implied, but just to make sure everybody gets it, because this is unique in RESO. Most RESO standards are listing centric or have to do with listings. This is public record information. And so you're talking about massive, massive data sets for which we don't control. They're controlled at a county level. but we've been greatly assisted by both CoreLogic and ICE, formerly Black Knight, who've looked at their national data sets and done some comparisons that have been very helpful. So really three things that we'll touch on these as we go throughout the presentation. So the first one is we're recommending that we move to a GeoID. That's an ANSI standard. If you're familiar with county and state data at all, you probably know that. If you look at census data, that should be a familiar term. It's not a significant change, but here again, it's sort of a cleaning up of the standard. The way we do that now is we have a state-county combination. So going back to what I said before, where are we? We're in Jefferson County, Alabama. So the FIPS code, as everyone here knows or should know, is, anybody? You guys didn't memorize all the FIPS codes for the U.S.? Kind of lame. But it's 01073. Sadly, I've done this long enough, I can't forget a lot of them. But anyway, so it's Jefferson County, Alabama, 01073. And then the sub-county is, in this case, it's 5 zeros because Jefferson County, Alabama does not have a sub-county that authorizes the creation of parcels and the taxing therein. That's more common parts of the Midwest and really in New England. So the GeoID, and Mark's got a couple slides where he'll show this much better visually, but it's just those three components in one number. So there again, just real quick, where we are, 01073 0000.
Where we are physically right now.
Right.
Not like in the work group progress.
So then the second thing, and if you've been following along at home over the years, this is one that we've done a bit of flip-flopping on, and not necessarily a bad thing. I think just perspectives have changed and we've gotten more input from different folks. So parcel number formatting. There's different counties might have different delineators, but it's usually a dash. And for our purposes today, we're gonna say it's a dash. And so here again, this seems kind of like minutia, but this is the type of stuff we have to deal with when you're talking about public records and standards. The original assumption was that we would keep those dashes in. We wanted to try to maintain the dash as close to what the county had as possible. The problem with that is that formatting is not always consistent and not always consistently handled by vendors. So you would have essentially the same number, but the formatting was the problem. And in fact, that example I said earlier when we were doing that massive integration of tabular and mapping data, that was a big part of that work, was to identify essentially bad formatting. So the group decided some time ago, okay, let's strip that format. So it's just purely a string of numbers. Makes matching a lot easier. The problem is there are certain jurisdictions or counties where when you remove the formatting, you create duplicity. The easy example, so 10-1 versus 1-01, you take the dash out, you got 101 in both. I think Alameda County, which is in California, is sort of our go-to example. If you take their traditional parcel ID field, strip the formatting, there's like 14,000 cases of 2 or more parcels. So it may not be a problem in a lot of counties, but where it is a problem, it's a pretty significant problem. So that's one thing. So we're recommending that we go back to that dashing. If you want to think of it simplistically, try to maintain the county logic. And then the last one, we are proposing moving to the URN, which is the unique resource name, and is just indicated by the fact I didn't know what the U stood for. Is my cue to say, and Mark will tell you more about that one.
Yeah, and it's just to be in alignment also with the way RESO does the ULI and some other things. So that's sort of a consistency factor. And just to get a little more specific, you can see we have version 1 and version 2. Version 1 is essentially the same thing, except it uses this an N, for example, if there's no sub-county control. And the sub-county control is really like townships. It's across the United States, mostly on the east side. You don't see it very much on the west side of the country, but ANSI's got a set of codes that they maintain, and we adopted those because a really good standard adopts other standards and reinforces those standards because, for one thing, they're already being maintained by somebody else, but also because they're in use by many, many other parts of the ecosystem. So for version 2, we're collapsing those into what's known as a GeoID, as was on there before. The GeoID itself is a standard. And this just gives you an idea of how the UPI from version 1 and the version 2 kind of compare. For one thing, we've got the dashes, as Matt was pointing out, inside the parcel. The parcel is delineated by a special character. By the way, this is not a guarantee that this is how the formatting will roll out specifically. It's a proposed formatting that we have. That's what we're discussing in the work group, those details. If you've got something to say or you're highly opinionated about how this should look, you should come to the work group, definitely, because this is what we're the discussion that we're having on this. So you can see in here, a regular residential property is that first one. And then there's a sub-property that has apartment 109. We've dealt with this before, and we have this S in there as a stock cooperative in that case. And the version 2 of that is very similar, houses it the same way, and we possibly will allow for a few more characters so we can have a little bit better, easier way to represent some of those things, like air rights, for example. That's how they kind of look compared to their other sub-property identifiers. Let me see. So you'll notice on V2, there's only 3 real components there. There's the ISO for the country, there's whatever the country uses, in this case, the GeoID, and then the parcel. And then that GeoID gets you all the way down to whoever is governing that particular parcel. And there's several kinds of GeoIDs. We're talking specifically about the county subdivision. You can read more about it here. It's published by the census area of the government, although it's maintained by the ANSI standards part of the government. They span all geographical levels that the U.S. controls, territories, everywhere, not just inside the main United States. You can see here where there's the number of digits we're pointing out here. You always have 10. Doesn't matter where you go. It's always 10. This is sexy. I know it sounds very informative. And I know Sergio thought it was boring. I personally think this is, if you're really into tech and you're really into this kind of thing, this is sexy. And speaking of sexy, we have Mike Wurzer.
No.
The GeoID part? This is a work group session, sure. The GeoID portion of the work of the. This part's actually just a projection of the other mechanisms of uniqueness. There we go.
Matt, or is this ready to be voted on or no?
This part is ready to be voted on, sure.
Okay.
Well, and I don't know from a order standpoint, in my opinion, I think we're ready to vote on version 2, which has those components.
There you go. Yes.
Yeah.
Let's vote. Let's vote.
We can get to a 5th really quick because that's what we have waiting for us.
You just want to have the break, right? You're just wanting the happy hour to start, right, Mike?
No,
I'm kidding. It's okay, I'm kidding.
Yeah.
No,
let's move this thing forward.
I think we should move it forward, man. It's a good proposal.
Okay, well, is there any
Got a motion and a second.
we got a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Sure, Rick. Oh, we have like 5 seconds. Couple slides back. Here? So we're not voting on the URN formatting. This is just to adopt the GeoID part of it. The GeoID change there. Let me go.
Well, no, I think Mike was actually saying his motion was to vote on version 2, which is URN, parcel formatting, and GeoID.
Oh, okay. Was that your intent of your motion, Mike?
Yeah,
Okay.
I'm with Michael. Let's do the whole dang thing. This is kind of drug on for a while, and the more we get it out there, start iterating on it, we'll make improvements. But yeah, let's get the version 2 done, whole thing.
Okay. And is there any more discussion?
We have more slides.
We got more
And
to
we'll go
talk
through
about.
them very, very quickly now.
Okay, so let's have the vote.
Yeah. Oh, sorry, I assume we won already.
If you're in favor, you can raise your hand. 1, 2, 3. Okay. Anyone against approving it? Okay. Oh, somebody's against approving it. So.
That's right.
Okay.
So our next UPI event will be sponsored by MLS Grid, and it will be open bar.
Right. It's RESO, so we can't have anonymous or unanimous. Is that what you're trying to say?
Yeah.
Okay. RESO 2.0. That's what we can call this now. Internet.
Well, sorry, let me interject one thing, but like John said, so, and Mike and Al, thanks for helping us push this along, because that was needed. I think we kind of had been stuck here. And to John's question, so version 2, and I think this is a good segue, Martin, if you go ahead and go to the next slide. Sorry. So this is really not, I mean, we can have version 2 approved, and then we still want to address these things like how does it get further deployed internationally? How do we address some unusual situations? So actually, timing's quite good. There's a strange guy at the mic there.
I just wanted to ask, did you confirm what just happened?
Yes.
Yes, the ayes have it.
Can you please say it out loud and take a victory
The
lap right
ayes
now?
have it.
Yes.
We've
Can we give a big round of applause to our chair and vice chair? Thank you.
And the URN format of the UPI for version 2.
It's a big deal. Thank you.
Yeah, it is
Big
done.
deal.
I don't know who said it, but I feel like some famous figure would have said, it is done.
It is done. I've been accused by Sam before of being very not explosive with great news. So
Yeah.
he's corrected me yet again. So,
Yes.
but he's the guy on the cover of magazines, so I guess he's probably right. So let's talk really quick about the international concerns. Sam's been talking about international for a while. It's been a theme coming in RESO. It's a great theme, by the way. And when we did the first version of the UPI in 2016, I want to say, 15, 16?
Yeah, something like that.
Something like that.
A while back.
We built it specifically to be international-able. Okay, so we started off with the country, for example, so that the countries could always, by definition, whatever they want to do, will still fit inside of a UPI model. So, and you saw the picture a while back that looked exactly like this. ISO countries, then there's a sub-country model that a country would use. There's a parcel model that countries use. We can't really say what goes inside that yellow box. We can't really say what goes inside the bottom box. Some countries are well behaved, some countries are not. But at the end of the day, and someone was up here earlier, Kelly, I think, from Offers, maybe? I can't remember. She was talking about in international, you don't want to tell people how to run their country, and we don't either. But this model as a block diagram works really well. And we've done some research on that, and you can see here, and this is just for examples only, but most countries, the ones here, they have a mechanism. They already have a definition of what goes in that middle piece. And I've illustrated here what those are. AGS for Germany, for example, that's an 8-digit number. It's always the same. It's 8 digits. It's Germany. They're very particular, okay? Anyone who sees German engineering, they're very precise. Theirs is great. It's the AGS. It's actually something in German I can't say. So, United Kingdom's got a similar model. Their model's kind of weird. It's gangly. It's not like a certain number of digits. But the point is they have a way to always identify a territory, because that's the thing. They got territories all over the world, as everybody knows. And they have ways to identify property all the way down to those pieces. It's a little more research for those guys. Otherwise, Italy, Spain, Portugal, they all have very well-behaved models. Mexico's actually fairly well-behaved. Canada, my research showed that Canada's very well-behaved. Anthony Procaccio, one of our work group members, kind of sort of disagrees. He's our impact contact. So, but it doesn't mean that it doesn't work because he's already made the model work. So there's really no issues from that perspective. It would fit the model that we have. It actually fits the current model. So very happy to see that. UPI challenges.
Yeah, so this challenge is is not unique to version 1 or version 2. It's just kind of the reality of sourcing data from many, many counties. And so I don't want to spend too much time on this because, quite honestly, I'm glad we did version 2 and want to get off the stage. But I will speak to this momentarily in the sense that if you look at it from a pure technical standpoint, the logic is, okay, we're going to go to a particular county. We'll say, we'll just stick with Birmingham. I'm going to call the Jefferson County Assessor's Office, say, we would like to acquire your data for these purposes. We'll get that data, and there's going to be a field in there, most likely, called parcel ID. And so that's a very simple solution. Where it can get to be, there's two issues that can be a problem. And here again, this is a little outside, this is not part of the versioning, this is just a reality of implementation, but I'm quite confident that we can solve it. In addition to the parcel ID, they might have a field called land parcel ID. They might have a field called account number. They might have other variations. And the realities in working in multiple markets with, if you think of it from an MLS perspective, which is where we always start, that MLS almost always has a history. They've done data themselves, they use a particular vendor, and so we might come in, let's say it was a competitor had that account, we won the account, so we go in and start providing our service. So we acquire the data, we do all this research, and we say, okay, the parcel ID is, this field is 123-45. And they're going to do their initial due diligence. They're going to say, that's great, but we've used a land parcel ID in eastern Texas for 100 years. And so the correct answer, if you're a vendor, is not too bad, we're using the parcel ID. It's we would be glad to use a land parcel ID because you're the customer. The problem is if we switch to that land parcel ID and we want to show deed images to those customers and we make an API call to whoever provides those deed images, if we don't account for the fact that they're probably a national vendor with parcel IDs and we're sending land parcel ID, our match rate is going to be basically 0. And so one idea I've suggested, and I talked to Anthony from CoreLogic actually right before this, I think we can make a quick pass at this, sort of a one-off to see, is sort of a county level metadata. So it's really just a few columns. What is that county? What is the sort of preferred field or understood field, and maybe list that there might be 3 or 4.
It's called a compliant field. It's the field we'd use for Josh's tools that can go through and look at this data. We would actually be able to tell if they're using the right field.
Yeah. So that's one of those, if you think about it from, we have to answer this question for 3,242 counties, it does feel like a bit of a daunting task. The reality is this is, the exception, not the rule. So what I think we can do is by comparing 2 data sets fairly quickly and say, it's not a problem in those 95% of the counties, and where it is a problem, I can say what we're doing, Anthony, what are you doing at CoreLogic, or Peter, what are you doing at ICE, whatever. So, like I said, it doesn't in any way take away from the version 2, it's just more of an implementation level problem.
Right, this actually applies to version 1 or version 2 anyway,
Exactly.
So it's a piece of metadata or a guide. We've also been calling it our implementation guide of what fields to pick, just to make sure that everyone's using the same one. I think that's probably clear to everyone by now, right? Any questions on that? So we have some work to do with data dictionary. So we'll be writing up one of the posts that Rob was just talking about, but we need to talk through these things that we need to talk to a little bit more detail inside the work group about how we would implement another version, quote unquote, this version 2 of the UPI. How do we want to represent that in the dictionary? What about if a listing has multiple parcels in it? How do you want to represent those? So we have to kind of bring those problems and some recommendations up for data dictionary, and the data dictionary group worry about how they want to represent it in a listing, because they're kind of 2 separate things to worry about. So we would have only our concerns that we're talking about in our work group. Really, it's their baby to rock. And that goes for version 1 and version 2 as well. So there's the concept of multiple, but there's also a concept of which things do you got in there. Do you have the URN model, version 2? Do you have I can call it the legacy model.
There you go.
The legacy model, because if you're querying for a listing, for example, that's probably really important to you to know. So those are some things we got to work out with the data dictionary group. These are very important topics. So for those of you that might be interested in those 2 parts of the UPI, the listing part and the UPI constituent parts, you need to go to both groups to have your voice heard.